bloom in the back bay. It's gone from the lower bay up into the upper part of the upper bay. Yes?
What are your efforts as far as reclaiming water?
We reclaim in the summer all the water that comes in that is tributary in this area roughly. So 100% of that's reclaimed and reused during the summertime. A smaller portion of that is used in the winter because we don't have the outside irrigation demands, and the excess is taken over to either the county sanitation district or used to fill in our reservoirs like the San Joaquin Reservoir. So we draw the San Joaquin down during the summer and fill it up during the winter, along with our other recycled water reservoirs. We are in the process of working on a project that will take this area that currently goes to the Orange County Sand District and bring that into the water district, so we will have additional wastewater to treat into recycled water. Our demands during the summer exceed what our supply is, and so we could use that water. We have several of these projects that you can see up here are in process. The biggest one right here is the Cienega site. That's by far the most expensive site. That is right up in this area right here, and that is a natural treatment system to take selenium out of the water to reduce the flow of selenium into the back bay. So the district, a number of years ago, compliments of John Campbell when he was in the Assembly, got the authority to treat urban runoff. We collect a certain amount of money in our rate structure to handle that, and that is a site that we are constructing and will operate to clean up the selenium to meet the TMD, total maximum daily load requirements on San Nico Creek going in the upper bay. Yes?
Is that a chemical process?
No, actually, we're using some natural material, allowing the pumping the water out of the creek, running it through the natural material, and so the selenium is being sequestered in that material.
Chemically, does it form like an oxide?
Well, there's 5 forms of selenium, and I'm not the technical. I'm the finance management guy on the board. I brought Paul Cook and Marilyn Smith with me to answer either technical or PR kind of issues.
It's just a pretty rare metal.
It is on the TMDL list, and so we're trying to come up with an inexpensive way of, which isn't terribly inexpensive, but we're trying to find a way to comply with it. Okay. Also, one advertisement, we remain the lowest water and sewer rates in the county still, and with all due respects to the county sand district, we treat roughly 1/12 of the flow, and total cost is about 60% of the total cost of the rest of the county. So, with that, I'd be happy to answer any kind of questions.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, Dick?
You've mentioned Buck Gully. We were going to put some of these dams in there to slow up the water and settle out some of the sediment, but it appears you're doing that also? I mean, ahead of us, or?
It's really more a matter of the controlling it at the source. So it's source control at the lawns. So these irrigation control devices
So you're working with the various subdivisions before it gets out of there?
Exactly.
Well,
So it'd be like the swale up there in Newport?
No, actually, we're putting in controllers into the irrigation area, so we're trying to minimize the amount of runoff, so the structures you have to put in order to handle the flow will be smaller than what they otherwise would be.
This is like the irrigation source control.
Right.
That's right.
So it doesn't leave the site. It just stays on the grass.
But don't we have a similar type program on that, Homer, or something like that?
I'm sure, I know you do. And I know that...
I think we're a part of that program, Dave, didn't we? At the last council meeting, authorized $30,000 into that kind of program?
That's correct, Homer. As Director Schwan mentioned, we're working hand in hand with IRWD to control sources. And then remember the concept behind the Buck Gully problem, the solution is control the source and then clean up what remains. So the wetland activity is to clean up what remains.
So this is one program, not,
It's one coordinated program, yes. IRWD contributes staff time and resources, and we contribute staff time and resources.
thank you.
But the Buck Gully is sort of divided between the city on one side and the district on the other side. I mean, it's all in the city, but you do the water service on one side, we do the water service on the other side. And so we're working on both sides to reduce the amount of water that's going down in the gully. It was well over 1 million gallons a week there
Just
in the
so
summer.
your comment is understood by others, you're really saying the south side, or the side westerly side is primarily in Newport Beach, and the easterly side is primarily in your water district.
Well, it's all in Newport Beach, and one side served by us and the other side served by you.
As far as the
Water.
sewer, the storm sewers and collection and that.
Now, Dick, I think you're getting a little confused here. Newport Coast area, when it was annexed, was served by the Irvine Ranch Water District. And so those areas that were annexed as a part of the Irvine Ranch Water District, are a part of the Irvine Ranch Water District, they're part of Newport Beach. As far as the storm sewers are concerned, we don't have any storm sewers in Southern California. We have storm drains. And storm drains are managed by the city of Newport Beach,
Right.
in both Newport Coast as well as the rest of the city. Any other questions, Mr. Kirby?
Mr. Mayor, first of all, let me say that I've had the opportunity to work with Pierre and the IRWD more than 8 years ago now to create the Water Reuse Financing Authority, which IRWD was instrumental in helping with. It helped finance more than $200 million in water recycling and reclamation. I think the folks at home ought to know that the IRWD is one of the most progressive and environmentally friendly and proactive water agencies in America, for which they have been justly recognized and for which they are justly lauded. Let me also say that I think you've done an excellent job here with the San Joaquin Hills Reservoir. My house looks directly on it. And on behalf of all of my neighbors on Vienna, we're just hopeful that you can keep the water level a little higher during the course of the summer.
Well, once we get additional, flow coming down, we can probably do that. But it's certainly better than that empty dirt hole that we had for about 5 years.
It was, yes, it is.
And I think, we've had from the board side, looking out and listening to the staff, we've had a very cooperative arrangement with the city, and we've been working on the Back Bay issues, on recycled water issues, cleaning up runoff kind of issues, taking care of things that are difficult to handle and take a lot of teamwork. And on your side, you've certainly put good people out there. Dave Kipp has been an absolute joy to work with, and is all the city staff that we've come in contact.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to? Well, I have worked with Irvine Ranch Water District for a number of years, too, and I do feel that of all the districts around, that you guys are kind of on the cutting edge of every new technology that seems to come out there, and we really have benefited from being able to tag on and use some of those resources in the city. So we appreciate the efforts that you have, and thank you for letting us take a part in it.
And before I leave, I'd like to say that if the people that have not come out to the San Joaquin Wildlife Sanctuary or have not done a tour of the district and who would like to, if you would just go to the staff and send an email or an address, and we'll arrange a time and accommodate a visit and maybe personally guided tour.
And there's the ability, if people are early morning types, to go out and take walks around your treatment facility in the San Joaquin Marsh area. It's my understanding you have some really neat walking trails back in that area.
Have roughly 12 miles of walking trails, hiking and jogging trails, a lot of joggers in there. And I see a number of people from time to time that we all know jogging around. So it's good to see, to have made something that not only serves a purpose of cleaning up the water going in the bay, attracts wildlife, and is a great place to get away.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. The next item on our agenda is the Newport Coast Parks, continued from July 11th. And I believe that's Mr. Kiff? Are you waiting for questions?
Sorry, waiting for the computer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. This is a informational item for you about a bunch of various issues involving Newport Coast parks. And I'm going to jump back and forth to one particular picture about one of the new parks that's under development or will soon be under development. I wanted you to kind of get your first look at that. And it's a big memory file, so it's taking a while to load. But let me go over what we will cover. Some news, updates, issues about what's called Coastal Peak Park. That's the brand new park under construction or soon to be under construction. A little bit about the Crystal Cove Historic District. There's some interesting things going on there. The Pacific Ridge Trailhead and what will be Newport Beach's entrance to the wilderness area. A little bit about Newport Ridge Park, because I know your council has been interested in that issue. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Buck Gully, and then talk to you about some agency issues that have come up that we'll need your council's direction on, involving the Natural Communities Conservation Plan, or NCCP, and the Nature Reserve of Orange County and Coastal Greenbelt Authority. So that's what we'll cover here. I'm going to try and load up that picture here for a second. Maybe a little bigger. This is what's called the Coastal Peak Park, at least tentatively, at the corner of Ridge Park Road and East Coastal Peak Road. And if we move to the big map here behind us, it's way up here at the edge of town, which Homer refers to as our panhandle. We actually have a little bit of property that snakes along the 73 freeway, and this park would be right at the start of that panhandle. If you drive up there now, you'll see all the homes under construction in Pacific Ridge, and these are multifamily units known as Ziani. And this is the park that's planned for that. This will be a public park. We'll have at least 2 ball fields with soccer field overlays. There's a tot lot, at least in this version of it, basketball court, picnic area, parking. There'll also be some parking along this road here. And Marie Knight and Mark Harmon in the audience, and they've actually are in the audience. They've been more involved in the planning discussions with the Irvine Company than I have. So I wanted to introduce this park to you, and if you had some questions, I'll ask Marie and Mark to help me on that. I think, correct me, the estimated time of construction is spring of '07. It would be entirely constructed through assessment district monies and then handed over to the city when it's done. It's not tied to any pre-annexation agreement. It indeed has to come to the city as a public park.
Dave, do you want to, or maybe Marie, give us the size, baseball fields, soccer use, I mean, those kind of things that are important, and, you know, kind of how many acres does this add to our deficiency?
Acres, I can't recall. 10? 8 to 10? 8 acres of usable recreation. So as Director Harmon just said, it's 8 acres of usable recreation space. The 2 ball fields will be Little League size fields. And then it's hard to see, but you'll have 2 full-size soccer fields here. And then over in the corner up here is a mini field for the younger folks. So that'll be added into our resources, and we will be allocating those fields as we do for all of the sports groups in town. We are down to, they've updated, so there's a basketball court here. Is that the sand volleyball? Batting cage? I can't, yeah. Restroom facilities, 2 picnic areas here, and then in the restroom facilities, we'll also have storage for the sports organizations that are up there, so that the only thing they will be storing on the fields are actually the goals that will put the concrete pads out for them when they're out of season. And plenty of parking in this lot here. There'll also be parking along the street that is available. And then there's a small little view park here that'll really just have maybe a few picnic benches there, possibly drinking fountain. It's got a gorgeous view from that area, so we're really not doing anything there except for that'll be a great place for folks to stop on their bike rides or runs and kind of enjoy a nice view.
A view of El Toro or of the ocean?
El Moro.
Oh, El Moro, not El Toro.
El Moro.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So we're very excited that it really is a needed asset, brings a few more ball fields to that side of town. So, and as Dave has said, we've been working with the Irvine Company as far as, the backboards for the basketball court, fencing. We want this to look like Bonita Canyon Sports Park, so the fencing, for example, on the ball field areas will all be the black painted chain link fence, very high quality.
How many parking spaces in the parking lot? Do you have any
Is
idea?
it 43,
It's not very many.
I believe?
Counting the road parking.
And there's parking, I believe, also along Ridge Road. You can park along Ridge Road as well.
Do you know how many more parking spaces you got on the road?
That I don't. I don't think that's come up in any of our meetings.
But you can park on both sides of that cul-de-sac also,
Right.
I believe. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's plenty for the use of the park, really. Because at any one time, you're only going to have, aside from practices, but if you've got either baseball games in play or soccer games in play, that is plenty to accommodate the teams and their spectators.
Is this a night-lit course, park?
No lights.
No lights.
No lights. The arrangement with the homeowners in advance was that there would be no lights. So there'll be safety, level lighting, but that's it.
Okay.
And what are we calling this park again?
The working title is Coastal Peak Park.
CPP.
CPP, yes. We're trying to stay away from any Bonita-y parks or Upper Bay View-y parks, because we've got plenty of those. We are already confused. And because of the name of the road there, we thought that was a really good way to go. Any other park-related questions?
I have a question just on orientation. The Newport,
Drive?
Newport, the one that goes up the hill, that's to the right, right?
Well, there are 2 major roads that go up the hill. There's Vista Ridge and Ridge Park. So
But-
Ridge Park continues down this way, as my laser dies, to Newport Coast. Vista Ridge actually snakes down this way.
Good.
Thank
Ridge Park
you,
goes this
Don.
way.
Correct. And then Vista Ridge comes
up and
down,
tees in, and it goes down like that.
and Newport Coast is over there where Don's pointer left off, right?
But these are way up at the tip, are they not?
It's up at the tip, actually beyond the crest of the peak, and the peak being Signal Peak, where all that signal equipment sits. So it's on the other side of that. So as Councilmember Ridgway mentioned about the view is a southerly coastal view over Crystal Cove State Park towards Laguna Beach.
But now all the homes are over the hill, so to
No,
speak.
the homes are
Right in here.
correct. The homes are right in here. And there's some multifamily back here. This is actually the start of the Bomber Canyon Wilderness area. So you take the trail down there into Irvine, into Turtle Ridge, and the Ziani community is right here.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll continue on. I wanted to do this both for your information and for the folks at home, just a reminder about what's happening at Crystal Cove Historic District. 22 of the 46 cottages have been restored. The Crystal Cove Alliance is out there working to restore the remaining 24. There's be a new restaurant opening, a new Ruby's down there right on the ocean on August 1st. And residents can take a shuttle from the Los Trancos parking lot at Crystal Cove State Park and be shuttled down there for dinner. That'll be kind of a really nice amenity for that community and for Newport Beach. And just a reminder how reservations work at the historic cottages, 7 months in advance, and you reserve actually for February of '07, starting August 1st of '06. That's a little bit off my slide. You have to reserve at 8 in the morning because they fill up that quickly. They're
Yes,
100% booked.
I can attest to that.
Yeah.
We were able to get one in the first 5 minutes
Oh, great.
on July 1st.
Okay. I haven't heard many people who've had success, but I know they're 100% booked.
Middle of the week.
I mentioned a little bit the trailhead. This is called the Pacific Ridge Trailhead. It'll be Newport Beach's first entrance to the Regional Wilderness Park, known as Laguna Coast Wilderness and Crystal Cove State Park. That used to be open weekends. It's now open 7 days a week. And we were just looking at the map of the Coastal Peak Park. People can park at the cul-de-sac at the end of Ridge Park Road, and that's for mountain biking, hiking, and equestrian access. I do have an aerial of that. So again, this would be where that park is planned. This is where the trailhead is, and it allows you entrance into this area. There's a really nice hiking trail that starts going down this community that's open and goes all the way into Crystal Cove State Park. That's just for folks' information at home. It's brand new. Let's talk briefly about Newport Ridge Park. Per Council's direction a couple of meetings ago, we're working on an operating agreement with the Newport Ridge Community Association for use of the ball fields. The operating agreement will address the public access and the walkway, detail as to times, days, and types of uses, liability provisions. We want to bring this back to you on August 8th. Any questions about that? I'm going to talk a little bit about Buck Gully because we're still in the Newport Coast. Just a reminder that the city took the title to the gully in July of '05. Almost all of the gully is in the coastal zone. And we're hearing more and more from resources groups that we have a lot of extensive problems in the gully that need to be addressed. The county kind of handed over to it problems intact. There's lots of invasive species out there. Artichoke, thistle, poison oak, ice plant, water quality issues that you heard about from Pier and others. There's fuel modification needs that we'd like to apply some fuel modification zones in the gully, and the possibility of a recreational trail. This is just a reminder, a map of the gully, and here's the coastal zone zipping along the western side. You can see most of the gully is in the coastal zone. We at the staff level have asked for a proposal from the Irvine Ranch Land Reserve Trust to develop a resource and recreation management plan that would take a look at the gully and review what permitting requirements we need to do, CEQA issues, do some biological studies, convene a stakeholder group of people who are interested in this, and then that would become a long-term management plan for the gully that would include our capital costs to address fuel modification, public access, removal of invasives, and protection of endangered species. So I wanted to bring that back to you in a couple of meetings when that's ready. IRLRT is a land management entity, and they're managing most of the other lands within the NCCP. I'll talk about that in a second. So they seem like a natural to do that. So let's talk about some of those agency issues. Most of the Newport Coast parklands are in what's called the NCCP. So what is the NCCP? That's the Natural Communities Conservation Plan, and this is a multi-species, multi-habitat reserve system authorized by the legislature that spells out specific land management activities for the lands within the reserve. And the goals are really the protection of three key species, the biggest one being the gnatcatcher, then the cactus wren, and the whiptail lizard. And this is overseen by what's called the NROC Board. And the NROC Board includes landowners in the in the reserve, in the NCCP, and it includes representatives from Fish and Game and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. I'm going to talk about what the NROC Board does a little bit more here. So what is the Nature Reserve of Orange County? It's two actual things. It's a nonprofit corporation that manages the NCCP for this region, and I'll show you a map of the region. Management means coordinating the activities of public and private landowners within what are 37,000 acres. They conduct wildlife habitat research and monitoring, and they do restoration of disturbed habitats.
How how are they funded?
They are funded through, in some cases, mitigation fees, and in some cases, when they're paid to do a restoration project, there's only 3 staff members, and they'll take the overhead for the restoration project. But they're officially a nonprofit corporation, so they can take donations too. So I mentioned it's 2 things. It's not only is it the corporation, the nonprofit that manages these lands, it's also the lands themselves. And there are 37,000 acres, as noted, within the NCCP lands. And inside the reserve, you can only do land uses that are compatible with wildlife preservation, and everything else outside the reserve, like economic growth and development, has to occur outside the reserve. So I'm telling you this because we've been asked to become part of NROC, or at least appoint council members to it. These are the reserve lands. So this is the coastal subregion. This is the central region. So you can see most of this is Crystal Cove State Park, Laguna Coast Wilderness. Then you'll see our Buck Gully. You'll see Coyote Canyon as linked lands. You'll see the land behind Sage Hill High School. And Newport Bay is actually part of the NCCP as well.
Who's on the board? Who's their current president?
They don't act with a president necessarily. They have, and this is, let me see if I even did a slide on that. Sorry, I don't think I did. The NROC board consists of each landowning agency. So the city of Irvine's there. The city of Newport can be there if we do one step, and I'll talk about that step. And then the big players are U.S. Fish and Wildlife and California Department of Fish and Game. And it's really a group that gets together that talks about managing the land, and Fish and Wildlife and Fish and Game kind of say yes or no, this is an acceptable use on that land.
What do you see as the pros and cons of being a member?
Right now, if we were to want to do something in Buck Gully, even if it was compatible with the NCCP, we have to go to NROC generally to get approval. And if we were actually sitting at the table as a member of NROC, then I think people would be more receptive. We would have established that rapport, built those relationships. So the second player in this is what's called the Coastal Greenbelt Authority. A bit similar to NROC, but there's a distinction. These are the landowners of the Laguna Coast Wilderness Park, Buck Gully, so that's us, parcels adjacent to Laguna Canyon Road. So this is the County of Orange, cities of Laguna Beach and Irvine, city of Newport Beach, and the city of Laguna Woods. And we're right now a non-voting member because we haven't done this one thing, and I'll tell you what the one thing is. And these folks attempt to manage the individually owned lands in the Laguna Coast Wilderness Park, of which Buck Gully is a member. So think Laguna Coast Wilderness Park, which Buck Gully is part of, is a subset of the Nature Reserve of Orange County. And the goal is to manage all these lands consistently. So why is this important? Well, we're now a landowner in the Coastal Greenbelt Authority lands, which happen to be part of the Nature Reserve of Orange County lands, and the same lands are in the NCCP. So clear as mud, I know, but think of subsets of each. And we've been asked to become voting members of the Coastal Greenbelt Authority and NROC, and your council would need to designate a primary and an alternate for both if you chose to do that. And the one thing we need to do is something that's been sitting on lots of desks for a while. We have to officially file a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service incidental take permit, relatively simple administrative step, to say that whenever we were to take property that's coastal, usually coastal sage scrub, that we would commit to mitigation at a certain level. And indeed, we're kind of bound to do that anyway on NCCP lands. So this would actually file the permit. And then if we did that, we would then become voting members of both these entities. Don has wrinkled eyebrows.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay.
Since we annexed about 5,000 or 6,000 acres in the Newport Coast area pursuant to a development agreement, or pursuant to a previous agreement with the county and the Irvine Company, do we all of a sudden become obligated to maintain under these guidelines that 5,000 plus acres?
Well, yes and no. We do where we own the land, not where we annex the land necessarily. The only area where we own the land that we also annexed was Buck Gully.
Okay.
Los Trancos and Muddy Canyon are still held privately, and those landowners, I'm sure it's the Irvine Company, are required to follow the NCCP for those properties. And they have indeed assigned them to the Nature Reserve of Orange County to fall under those rules and regulations.
Okay, now, if we do the incidental take permit and we do something to property that is not in those other areas, like, for instance, the property that's north of the library that has coastal sage scrub on it, and we modify that, would this take permit obligate us to those specific mitigation measures? In that it's not part of those lands, it's owned by the city, and we're affecting coastal sage?
Sharon or Robin may be able to help me more, but it's my understanding that today, regardless of where the land is, if we take coastal sage scrub habitat away, we have to mitigate for it, even if it's not necessarily part of the NCCP. But and I don't know if it's an actual legal requirement. It's a requirement placed on us by permitting authorities, but we might have to look into that further. The general, as it's been explained to me by the NROC staff, this applies to land within NROC and the Coastal Greenbelt Authority, this provision for the permit. So we would spell out in our permit that we're agreeing to be subject to those take requirements for that land specifically, not necessarily for other land. That doesn't mean that something else doesn't catch us on the other land today without even filing this permit.
Well, I understand that. I just
Okay.
want to make sure that doesn't change our relationship in other locations.
Okay.
Dave, who's asking us to become members of these groups?
Both the Coastal Greenbelt Authority and NROC.
Is it like their staff or
Yes, because they
director
think.
or who?
Sorry, pardon me?
Is it a staff member, director, or board, or what?
The executive officer is Lynn McAfee, and she said we would like the city to become a member of NROC.
Is she the executive officer of both?
Of NROC. No, there isn't an official executive officer of the Coastal Greenbelt Authority.
So who's asking there?
The membership will kind of turn to me because I sit there as a non-voting member and say, when are you going to fill out your permit, and then be able to vote on some of these things. So it's that's a much looser knit group that doesn't come with many requirements, if at all. It's just a collective, collaborative way to manage the land. They don't tell you what to do. NROC is more an attempt to ensure that everybody's at the table doing exactly what they're supposed to do.
Dave, question, how does this, or does this fit, or anything like that, so it's wide open, with the Irvine Conservation Authority that was set up by the Irvine Company as a separate group, and what are they doing versus this, and is it on the same properties?
The Irvine Ranch Land Reserve, and I'm going to stop before I say trust because that's a separate entity. The Irvine Ranch Land Reserve is part of the Nature Reserve of Orange County. In other words, the Irvine Company has dedicated land in perpetuity to be administered by the Nature Reserve of Orange County. The Irvine Company also set up what's called the Land Reserve Trust to actually help manage the lands where they're wanted to be managed. In other words, where there's an opportunity to manage them, to be stewards of this land set aside.
But they're not involved in either of the two groups that you've talked about?
They don't sit on the board. They would be the equivalent of a company that you would hire to go in and pull out artichoke thistle or design a trail. They just do programs. They don't have authority. They don't sit on boards. They don't vote.
So
they're a contractor, in
They
effect.
don't have any overall authority for running any given district or
Only
something.
when it's been assigned to them. And
But
it has
is
been
that-
assigned to them in
well,
some lands. Sorry?
Has that been assigned to them?
It has
in
been assigned to
areas?
them in some lands. They administer the Bomber Canyon area of Irvine and some other Irvine open space lands on the the far side of Irvine past the base.
Have you, is there any thought of that group possibly managing some of these? And if so, has it worked out pretty well?
Well, I
They
think
are?
they do quite a good job, and that's why I asked them to present a proposal to us to manage Buck Gully. To do and I would bring that before you as a contract to consider, with a scope of work and a term.
The only question I have is, now we have two other authorities. We have the IRWD that seems to be involved in that, and ourselves through the Water District and our, fire department and all that stuff. So that could be merged, is what you're saying, and maybe work out pretty well?
It could certainly be coordinated. Remember, no one right now is administering Buck Gully. It's just out there. It has erosion problems. It has invasives. Someday, the time is going to come when we as landowners are going to have to do something to fix the problems out there. So I'd like to bring something to you folks to consider, a plan to fix the problems and a 20-year effort, because it can't all be done at once.
I'm sort of pro for at least seeing that
Okay.
plan, because I think it has a lot of merit. And the same with the Upper Buck Gully, if they want to get involved there, I mean, that seems to be a natural, because a lot of those are their subdivisions and so forth that they're involved in still.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Daigle?
Yes, I appreciate you're going to be providing us with a plan for Buck Gully that's proactive. I did have a question, though, and I may have been missing a few steps here. The city owns Buck Gully, and then we have this NCCP that we somehow would have to get permission from them if we join them to make any changes. And my question is, what is the authority of this organization? I know you said they have 3 employees. I mean, what is their organization? What is their authority to regulate activity in Newport Beach?
It's not the Nature Reserve of Orange County that has authority. It's the NCCP founding documents that have authority, and we're a signatory to them.
Okay.
So what those documents say is whenever we have land that we own or manage that is within the habitat conservation area, we agree to manage it a certain way. What NROC does is it makes sure that those activities are indeed complied with, and it helps. It serves as a resource. They have a biologist, they have a restoration expert, and if we were members, we'd call them up and say, hey, come and take a look at this. What would you suggest? It would still cost us money to actually do the project, but their advice and assistance is generally free because they know how this land is linked to the rest of the land, and they know the NCCP like the back of their hands.
By becoming members, do we give them any more authority than they currently have?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Nor are we subject to any new regulation. To me, it's just an opportunity to sit at the table as if we were to propose a project and maybe have a little bit more credibility as our project is proposed. And I guess I'm speaking mostly of a recreational opportunity in Buck Gully. If we ever wanted to do a trail down there, that's the thing that would be a little bit more on the controversial side, and where it might help to have some credibility on the board.
On Buck Gully, that was dedicated to the city by the Irvine Company as part of Newport Coast, or it came from the county as part of the annexation, or how did we get it?
It came to us in July of last year. Your council had adopted a resolution accepting Buck Gully plus the 5 view parks along Newport Coast Drive and San Joaquin Hills, and a bunch of scenic easements. It was originally, Buck Gully was originally the land that is not owned by private property owners, and that's roughly from Fifth Avenue to Little Corona is owned by private property owners. The land from Fifth Avenue up to San Joaquin Hills Road was owned by the county, and we at staff level and working with you at council had said that we would like to start to take charge of these parklands that are in our community, especially the view parks, as well as starting to manage the gully, because the county was not allocating any funds at all towards that, the gully's maintenance. And they were never going to. They were pretty clear about that. So it was a decision made mutually between the county and the city to accept those, for the city to accept those lands.
It sounds like it's going to be pretty expensive. It's going to take 24 years to do whatever has to be done there. Did we know that it was going to be that expensive when we took it? Or is it something we've discovered in the last year?
No, we knew, one of our biggest concerns with Buck Gully has been the possibility of a major wildfire occurring there. So we knew that there is not adequate fuel modification or hazard reduction in the gully. So that was part of our interest in taking control of the land so that we could implement that. I don't know that it's take a 20-year plan to remediate that. What I proposed to the Irvine Ranch Land Reserve Trust was to come back with a 20-year plan and see what that would look like. It may cost $200,000 a year for 20 years. I'm speculating until I see the plan. But so again, the city's main impetus at the time was to try to deal with this fuel hazard reduction. So, which is why we entered into
So
talks
it's more
with
of
the
a
county.
public safety issue than
Yeah,
anything.
because I think if you ask the fire chief where the biggest potential fire hazard in Newport Beach is, he'll say it's Buck Gully. Okay,
Next item?
that's all I had, and then we'll go to the next one.
Okay. Any questions on Dave's presentation? Thank you very much for bringing us up to date. The next item we have is cable franchise agreement, Cox Communications. I assume that's you also?
It is.
And that's on our agenda for tonight, right?
Yes, and this will be a very brief presentation because you do have it on your agenda. I wanted you to have the opportunity to ask some questions if you wanted to, as soon as this comes up. More memory problems.
Does that mean you're going to be requesting a new computer?
No, this is a new computer. I can't do that. As this is booting up, I just wanted to remind you that on tonight's agenda is indeed the culmination of probably 7 years' worth of work. It's the Cox Communications franchise agreement. Jim Leach is in the audience, too, and hopefully if you had questions of Jim, you can feel free to ask him. I didn't want him to stay till the bitter end tonight, or didn't want him to have to stay.
It's about 2 o'clock this morning.
So I'm also going to just remind you and the folks at home what we just did with Time Warner, because they're somewhat comparable. The city's negotiations with Time Warner have just completed. They came to your council last month on June 27th, and you'd authorized the mayor to sign 3 things. One was a consent to transfer agreement, where we agreed to let Adelphia transfer its Newport Beach assets to Time Warner. Secondly, was a settlement and mutual release agreement saying we'd settle all claims for $22,000, and they just sent us that check. And then there's an MOU, which I think is most important to the residents and to the council. This is binding on Time Warner for 10 years, regardless of what happens at the state or federal level. The franchise fee will remain at 5%, and they're going to give a PEG grant, so Public Educational and Government Access Grant, of 50 cents per subscriber per month, which is roughly $120,000 a year. And that will be ongoing solely for public education and government programming. And then they'll also give a one-time PEG grant of $28 per subscriber, or $476,000 on a one-time basis. And this can be reserved for cable-related improvements either in this city hall or a new city hall, whether the robotic cameras, the editing equipment, that's a good chunk of money to be invested in public education and government programming.
One kind of point there, because I talked to the cable executive, and what he told me is there wouldn't be restrictions on the use of that money.
On the Time Warner side or the Cox side?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I was talking about Cox.
Okay. Actually, you may know more than I do, Councilmember Daigle, about that. It was my understanding that this was intended to be used for cable-related things. But, and then also this directs us to immediately begin franchise negotiations with Time Warner to be done by December 31st of this year, hopefully. So again, now that's 2/3 of the city. The next side is what's on your agenda tonight. This is the proposed franchise agreement. The term of this agreement would last till April 1st of 2011, with an option on Cox's part to extend to 2018. Franchise fee is 5%. They have to have a local office within 20 miles per our ordinance. They would offer a initial capital grant of $60 per subscriber, which is roughly $660,000. An additional capital grant of $30 after 2010 for new subscribers over what we have today. And those capital grants are in lieu of ongoing support. They would not make a payment like Time Warner will for ongoing support. They would authorize 3 PEG channels and up to 2 more if needed, and just some brief comments about the other things. Drops to city facilities. Everything's required to be undergrounded. They keep a complaint log, technical service standards met, and assurances that changes in state or federal law won't impact the capital grant or the franchise fee payments. So that's what's on your agenda tonight. We would certainly appreciate approval, and if you had questions, happy to hear those.
Given the ever-changing regulatory environment, I think you did a great job negotiating these deals on behalf of the city, and, particularly that we will be receiving these revenues, irrespective of what could happen in that ever-changing environment. So I certainly will be supporting it.
Thanks. Much credit goes to Bill Marcarena and Jim Leach, too, for negotiating as well as they did.
Anybody else have any questions on this item?
Yeah,
Mr.
sort
Nichols?
of the question was the state, is it trying to adopt a state law, I guess, how will that affect this? Canada, will it affect it at all, and would it affect it retroactively?
Well, Councilmember Nichols, you're right that the state level and at the federal level, they're talking about statewide franchising to allow the introduction of groups like AT&T to come in and offer video service. The Time Warner settlement agreement is very clear that it lasts for 10 years and it's unaffected by any changes. It's literally a court settlement agreement, unaffected by changes of state or federal law. The Cox agreement, there are probably aspects of it outside of the capital grant that could be affected by statewide franchising if Cox decided that it wanted to compete on the same playing field as the AT&Ts of the world, assuming that bill passes. I see Cox as a high-quality provider. I don't think they're going to propose any changes to this, regardless of what happens at state law. Obviously, if they find themselves in a non-competitive environment, they'll want to do that from a pure business perspective.
Could you just clear up something for me? These 2 providers have wires in the front lawn, so to speak. I'm just trying to, in a really simplistic fashion, kind of make a difference. And that AT&T has wires on the telephone poles, right?
Oh, underground sometimes, too?
Okay, well,
Yeah.
but that's if they have the rights, if they bought the rights as a...
Well, wherever utilities are undergrounded, AT&T is undergrounded as well. Or,
Okay,
yeah, they may have to borrow someone or buy someone else's pipe, like Verizon.
Typically, they're the rear end versus not from any other connotation, but they're the people that are using the alleys and the right-of-ways in the alleys to get to the...
I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think it
Well-
depends on where we're undergrounded.
Because most
Yeah.
places don't have alleys, so
Okay.
you're absolutely
Okay.
right. But, so then, I was just trying to see what the difference was, and would this be an uneven playing field that would get divided up some way anyway, or how,
Well,
do you have comments?
The issue of the uneven playing field is being discussed extensively in Sacramento right now, and most local agencies, including the League of Cities and County Supervisor or the County Association, are lobbying to try and change the statewide franchising bill to protect cities' control over their right-of-way, PEG support, and related things like that. There's still lots of discussions going on. The cities are not happy with the final bill. They may be happy after amendments, but it does seem like some type of statewide franchising will occur and become effective January 1st. And it may indeed result in an unlevel playing field, and folks like Cox and Time Warner may want to have to look at their business model to make sure they can still compete. I'm confident that at least some of the PEG aspect of this and the financial aspect of this will continue. And indeed, if AT&T or Verizon comes in and provides the service, they're at least obligated to provide a franchise fee in the last version of the bill.
So
Thank you.
right now, we're supporting the PEG type service through what we're doing here in these two.
And that's coming out of your general fund right now. Right.
Great, and because the AT&Ts and the Verizons aren't going to give us any pegs at all, right?
I don't know the latest discussion of the bill. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to provide the same quality of local programming that our cable providers do.
They would not tie in and broadcast council meetings.
Correct. There'd be no obligation for them to do that.
Will Adelphia still be considered, will Adelphia still be broadcasting city council meetings?
It kind of depends on where City Hall ends up.
Oh,
Remember,
really?
the city
Interesting.
the city is split between Cox and Time Warner. The
So
service
Newport
area
Center
up here
is
for those
Cox
that are
territory?
curious.
Okay.
If the concept is that if City Hall stays in a Time Warner service area, Time Warner would do that. If it moves to a Cox area, we would talk to Cox about doing that.
So does Jim Leach favor City Hall in the peninsula?
You have to ask him that.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you very much. I believe that that closes the items for presentation. Is there any public comments?
Dave, does Cox Cox serve the Newport Center?
Yes.
Yeah,
They do.
just flash that map up there. There is a map in your packet in the back of your, I think it's item 16, that shows Cox's service area, if you want to pull that up.
Okay. Nobody, I see no one wanting to make public comments on this item. Is anybody wanting to make public comments on anything in general that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, then I would adjourn until we return at 7 o'clock, and we'll go into closed session at 6. Or do you want to do it earlier than that?
Let me check and see. If we agendize it for when study session's over, we could go in, the council could go in now. And
Mr. Rosansky might not be here.
Robin says it isn't a very long study session as
shouldn't
far
take
as
more
the
than,
items
like,
are
10
concerned. So you might
minutes.
want to do it now and give yourself more of a break between the study, this closed session and the regular council meeting.
Dave, does Councilmember Rosansky need to be here for this, since you're one of the he's one of the negotiators on one of the items?
We can certainly talk about it.
Okay.
It'd be nice for you to.
Oh, that's the, okay. Okay, we can give him a call.
Those are mine. Those are mine.
Okay.
I just pulled them out of here and set them right here.
Does the council want to?
I just pulled them right here.
Let's adjourn for study session, I mean, a closed session, and
These papers.
Yes.
We're locked into that.
Yeah.